Hi, I'm Senior Investigator Rich Morin, and with me, as always, is
Senior Investigator Ed Myron.
Ed. We're doing part two of the ice diving today. We
Right.
got a little bit of delay in it because part two, the original one we did, is out there in Cloudland somewhere. Not
Yeah.
quite sure what happened to it, but it went off it
Technical
went.
technical technical difficulties.
So we're going to do part two again.
Yes.
But so let's get into it.
All right.
We were talking about safety considerations. And again, this isn't a class. This is just some recommendations as far as safety equipment goes and
Right.
things that we, when we used to teach ice diving, things that we would go over. But as far as equipment considerations, go to the next slide, bud.
Yep.
Just focus on the pictures here. A broad shovel like the aluminum one up top or the plastic one on the bottom, they work great because they're lightweight. So if you got to move a lot of snow, it helps out. Sometimes, people do the wagon wheel, or sometimes when people want to clear it all off, etc.
Right.
Another piece of equipment on the far right side is an ice spud to help free ice chunks from the ice surface itself, or to help free ice when you're cutting it with a chainsaw and pushing it, etc.
Yeah. We also use it if the ice chunks once we're putting them back in the hole. A lot of times they freeze to the surface. We break them loose with the ice
Yeah, to
bud.
free them up. Yep,
Yep.
and it works good too for like pushing the ice chunks on the surface. Sometimes we can get them to slide real well.
Right.
By pushing it, so we don't have to keep bending over quite so far. And what's in
Right.
the middle there, Ed?
So that's the ice screws that we use for securing not only all the tuna balls for the safety, but for all the divers and the safety diver as well.
Yep. So we secure all our lines that are going to be attached to the divers with those, and they come in different lengths. So the thicker the ice, the longer the ice screw we use to give us a little bit more support. You got to be careful though, if it's too long, that the thread part can actually start going through the ice, and then the shaft that's just below where you're going to attach the line to, it's got no bite now. So you got to
Right.
make sure that you got the proper length ice screw for the job you're going to be doing. And the little picture underneath that with the red caps on it, these things are razor sharp.
Yeah.
So when they're not in use, it's extremely important to put the caps on because they can easily puncture a dry suit or a BCD or a glove.
Yeah.
They're just razor sharp at the edges. What else we got, Ed?
Okay. So again, if the ice is thick enough, this was one of your favorites right here.
Yeah, use the UTV with the plow on it. And we're actually doing in front of the business right here,
Right.
a big snow that we had. But we'd use this out on the ice, providing that the ice was strong enough. And when I say strong enough, we always made sure that it was at least 12 inches before we start bringing any vehicle out on the ice at all. The bigger the vehicle, the thicker we want the ice. But this made quick work of it. We could clear off a huge area very quickly, and a lot of times clear it right down to clean ice, so we can actually see through the ice itself.
Right.
So it worked out real well.
And we use this many times
Yeah,
during
because like it
recovery
says up top, sure
situations.
beats shoveling.
Oh, what's that?
It sure beats shoveling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But we use this many times in recovery situations
Yeah.
where we had
This
to get
this
in
was
and
our
get out.
kind of our go-to vehicle. This must have been when it was brand new because we don't have all the lights on it, and
Yeah, all the
flashing
lettering
lights and
isn't
all
on it.
the
Right.
all the lights that light up the areas in front and back. So this must
Right.
have been when it was fairly new.
Yeah.
But we had this machine for quite a few years. It was a diesel, tremendous torque. We put chains on the tires if we had to go through, up mountains and stuff to do some remote recoveries. But it saved us so much work in the long run, hauling gear out and back, and
Oh, yeah.
even with the winch on the front, helping to pull things out.
Right. Right. This was a great vehicle.
Yeah, just a beast. When I left St. Croix, I sold that to, I don't know if anyone sees Caribbean Life, and the realtor in St. Croix, but I sold it to him, and he's also owns a big marina down there, and he's still using it.
Yeah,
So it's a
nice.
great machine. But as far as
So,
lines go, we always tried to use 5/8 or 3/4 inch polypropylene line. We'd buy it on spools with 600 feet on it, and then cut it down to size. But for the dive line, we used 100 feet of line. For the safety line, we used 200 feet of line. And then we had stuff bags. And, you got to stuff it in a certain way so that when the line's coming out, it doesn't get tangled at all. And we'll go over some of the braiding here. We'll show you at the very end. I think we have a slide, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep,
as
you're
far
right.
as eye splicing.
Yep,
But and the reason that we did that, back up 1 minute, Ed, if you
yep,
could.
sure.
The reason that we went with such a thick line like that, because I know minimum standards are only a quarter inch, but I mean that's like dive flag line. Um, it's cold. You're diving into the ice, and with your thick mitts on or your dry gloves, etc., it's hard to grab onto the thin line. This gives us something really nice and meaty to grab onto. Plus, it floats, so we don't have to worry about it coming down and getting tangled up in our fins or the other equipment and stuff. So it's kind of floating above us. So it works out real well. And in an emergency situation, we want it to float because we want it to go underneath the ice sheet. If there's a problem, the divers will surface underneath the ice sheet and wait for the safety diver. And again, they have floating polypropylene line, and that'll come right around the surface of the ice, just underneath it rather, and then you can just grab onto it, and now you know your way back to the hole.
Right. And it's always good for the surface support people too. Same thing, right? You're
Yeah,
wearing heavy
pulling people
gloves,
in,
you
especially in
know.
an emergency situation.
Right, right.
It makes
So
it
I
a
mean,
lot easier.
right.
All right, what else we got here? Some of the other safety equipment that we had. Why don't you take this
Yep.
one, Ed?
Yeah. So we have the locking carabiner. So we never use this open type carabiner. The reason why is you can see why right here. If a line were to get caught and pull this uh, um, latch open, I mean, your line can come out. So we always used two locking carabiners, and we did it opposite each other so that there was no chance that the line or the diver was going to come loose, right? And
Yeah,
then,
the open gate. I know some people use open gates and they'll put one face in one direction, one face in another, but we've seen them turn. When you connect them to the D-ring and the harnesses, we've seen those turn and just problems. I mean, so why take the chance with the
right,
locking carabiner? Like you said, we put them in opposite direction, one facing one way, one facing the other, but we put two on the end of the eye splice on the rope, and then it clips into the harness. Talk a little bit about the harness, Ed.
yep. So here's we use a full body harness, not just the chest harness. We use a full body harness with legs. And the main reason for that is that if we were just going to use the chest harness or the upper body harness, again, you're in dive gear. There's a lot of weight. So if we were just going to pull you out with a just a chest harness, there's a chance it's going to slip up, right? It's going to slip up on the diver, and
Yeah, or
and
if the diver's unconscious and you start pulling and the arms go up
right,
because all the equipment is riding up, it could possibly pull them right out of that.
right,
They got a weight belt on. That could be a huge problem.
right.
So the
So
legs certainly make it a lot safer.
right. So
And
we
look how
use
heavy duty that is.
right. Yeah. I mean, this is the same one, the same types of body harnesses that construction guys use, roofs and, steel workers.
Tall buildings. Yeah,
Right.
the ones that we use were, and this is a picture of it actually, was by a company called Falltech,
Right.
and they weren't cheap. Back then they were $180 a piece, so I'd imagine they're probably about 225 now per harness. And I mean, I don't know how many did we have? 10, 12?
Yeah. We had, yeah,
So
at least 12. Yeah.
yeah, so a big investment, but
r-
what do you put a price on safety?
Right. And we never used these locking carabiners on our BCDs. We used to see it all the time. We would never attach to a plastic D ring or anything like that on a BCD. We
Yeah, think
always used,
safety. Plastic gets cold, takes a big bump, it can crack, it can, last thing you want to do is pull out of something when you're underwater, and next thing you know, you see your line coming undone.
right. So, and here's the main locations that we would attach to. So you can see how heavy duty these rings are right here. So we would attach either to the right or left side of the diver, and there's another one right up here. So in case there is an emergency and we had to pull this diver out, we could also attach here to get that diver out of the water a lot quicker.
Yeah, and we always have a line ready with a locking carabiner on it so that we can just snap it if there's a problem on the surface, snap it in, lock it down, and pull tight to keep them from descending at all.
Right,
And then from there, like you said, if needed, we can pull them right up out of the hole.
right,
These are the same harnesses that we also used for our commercial work. We were using ones with legs on them, et cetera. Also, I know commercial divers, we've got other harnesses that we do, kind of like the half body harness, but I always like the full body harness, with the legs, et cetera.
right. Yeah,
That time where I got pushed through that 20-inch pipe there on that hydroelectric plant. When it was time to come up, I was thankful that I had the full body harness like that on
right,
because I had to send my gear up first through the pipe, and then they send another line down. And it's on a winch system that's on a tripod that's over the top of the pipe itself inside the hydroelectric plant. And then I had to raise my arms up to kind of elongate my body, and it was a tight fit for me. I'm a big guy, and being pulled up through that, it was nice having that extra support with that. But
right. You would have never been able to do that with just a chest harness, or a upper body harness. You need
yeah, I
that
would have been
full
a little
body harness.
nervous, with my arms up like that,
Right,
getting pulled out of that,
exactly.
and then what?
Right.
Yeah.
Then you're back down.
And then there's ways to secure like you were talking about, secure the lines, the tuna balls, the inflatable balls that we had for safety. That I think we might have explained that a little bit earlier, how we set
Right,
that all up. But anyway, like I said, the ice screws are preferred method. But one thing we got to be careful. I know some people, if they're close to shore and there's no obstructions at all, they can bring the line back and attach it to a tree, give you a firm base on it. That photo that we have right there, it's hard to see, but way off in the
way
distance,
back
you can
here.
see a person walking right there. So running a line across that path, not a good idea.
No,
Um, we don't want somebody to get upset and go, hey, what are they, and then cut your line while you got people in the water. So you got to be careful. Think about what's going on. You can also take the chainsaw, and make a rectangle in the ice itself, as long as you don't go all the way through. Set a concrete block in it, run your line around it, and then pour water around it and let it freeze. So
right,
that gives you a solid base also. The only problem is if it's a sunny day, sometimes the block heats up and it starts to melt the ice around it and the block becomes loose.
right.
But one of the things about the block though is if it does slide toward the hole and it ends up in the hole, usually it's going to land on the bottom close to where the hole is up above. So, hopefully you follow it back and you kind of,
Look
follow it
around.
straight up and
Right.
hopefully the hole is right there. But ice screw is definitely the method.
And we
And what
never,
about
ever,
mater on the bottom there?
yeah, we never, ever want to attach it to a vehicle, ever. Because just like you were saying, well, um, somebody jumps in the vehicle and, there's an emergency, or all right, let me take the vehicle and, you know, uh,
Yeah, sometimes people
take off.
panic, or they're not thinking rational,
Right.
or adrenaline kicks in and they forget. And you got the line going to a trailer hitch, or you got to go into a bumper or something like that. And somebody jumps in the vehicle and takes off. You got a big problem on your hands.
Exactly.
All right, what else we got?
Okay. Some,
Exposure protection and equipping the diver.
yep.
So this is actually one of the divers doing a backwards giant stride. Um, I like to tell people what he's doing is he's actually swimming really hard and he's coming up and standing back up on the ice. But no, he's actually doing a backwards giant stride. Very easy to do. Plus, the line stays in front.
Yep.
Normally, we have a tender on them, keeping the line relatively short. But for the photo on this one here, the tender steps off to the side a little bit so we can get a good photo on it. This was actually one of our instructors doing an entry right here. But
And you see
makes it
here,
easy. Another preferred method is just to kneel down with your back toward the hole and just kind of scoot back until your fins are in the water. And again, line tender holds onto you, and you just kind of lean back and fall back in the water a little bit. Makes it
right.
simple. We always make sure that we got some air in the dry suit and we have air in the buoyancy control device before anybody approaches the hole, just in case somebody falls in. We know they're going to float.
Right. And explain why we're wearing helmets.
Well, in a runaway ascent, which happens, sometimes people get a little confused with their dry suit or they're in the wrong body position or, um, so what happens, or they can't vent air quick enough and they start rising too quickly in a runaway ascent. There's other techniques that you can use to deflate. But again, sometimes what happens is high anxiety sets in and people forget. Next thing you know, the ice sheet is coming up real quick and you don't want to hit it with your head
Right.
because that'll give you a concussion. I mean, it's like hitting a concrete wall. Just imagine running into a concrete wall head first. So we always wear helmets
Yep.
whenever we're in any overhead environment so that we protect our heads. So if we're inside shipwrecks, caves, caverns, under the ice, or any environment where we don't have direct access to the surface, if it's a hard surface above us, I'm not talking about vegetation, but if it's a hard surface above us, we always wear helmets.
Right.
And on all of our recovery jobs that we do, we wear helmets.
Right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the regulators.
Yeah, it's important that regulators um, are suited for ice conditions.
Right.
Now, we just happen to pick this particular brand right here to demonstrate, but the regulator on the left would be considered more of an ice style. It's got a seal first stage on it, etc. The regulator on the right is a great breathing regulator, probably the most popular regulator that they sell, but the internal pressure has got to be turned way down in order to be sufficient for ice. And over the years, I mean, we've had just about every brand out there that has failed on an ice dive. People show up and we ask them, is your reg been recently serviced and has it been detuned? In other words, has the internal pressure been dropped to about 120 or even 110? And a lot of times, people are like, no, it's going to be all right. And boom, as soon as you start to descend, they got a free flow.
Right.
First stage freezes up or second stage freezes up. So we got an issue on it. Over all the years that we were doing it, and it was a lot of years, we certified, I don't know how many ice divers over the years, but I know we were one of the top for the organization that we trained for because they told us. We helped write the original ice diver manual and the rewrite that that was going to go out, but we ended up rejecting it. But anyway, so we had one brand that I don't think I ever saw fail once, but it's a lot of good brands out there, and they're all good brands actually. As long as they're serviced properly and they're set up.
Right.
Most regs, if you think about it, a lot of the diving takes place, approximately 20 degrees above and below the equator. If you made a band all the way around a globe, and start looking at all the different islands and all the different locations, that's where most of the diving in the world is taking place.
Right.
For the diehards that are way up north or way down south, as far as south of the equator, you need equipment that's going to be a little bit more durable,
Right. And
that
more
can handle
suitable
the
for the
cold
conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, BCDs, even though you have a dry suit on, a BCD is extremely important because, if you have a dry suit flood, or if you have an issue, I've never seen anybody yet be able to oral inflate their dry suit, when there's an issue. So if there's a problem, we go back to our buoyancy control device.
Right.
I know some people out there use both. They put a little air in their BC, a little bit of air in their dry suit. But normally recommended you just use once you descend, your BC is used on the surface or for emergency situations underwater. But once you let the air out of your BC and you start to descend, your dry suit becomes your buoyancy control device throughout the dive.
Right.
And again, just a little tip
Yep.
out there. And once again, it's not a class. Your training organization or your instructor might do things a little bit different. We're just giving a few different ideas here.
Right.
As far as weight systems go, that's another one of our instructors right there, and he's told him, "Hey Tyler, lift your arms up so we can get a good shot of your weight belt." You can see two buckles on there, right hand release. The reason we use two buckles is because Tyler is also using a weight belt. And if for some reason a line came across a buckle or, he made contact with the bottom, et cetera, and a buckle popped open, We don't want to lose the weight belt on a dive in an overhead environment
Right.
because he'd be in a runaway ascent at that point and end up smacking into the underside of the ice. So that's the reason that we put double buckles on it, so that if one comes undone, we still have one secured while you reach down and close the one that came undone.
Right.
That's the float ball that we're looking at, and then just behind them,
Yep.
call
The
them
tuna
tuna
ball.
balls
Yep.
also. But that's attached to a 30-foot line that we can actually kick right across the ice hole itself. The hole is just to Tyler's left, right
Yep.
off his left fin there, where you can see the open water. Down a little lower, Ed. Right,
Oh,
right.
oh,
That nope,
oh,
to the other side. I'm sorry,
oh,
to
yeah,
the
right
right.
here. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's the hole right there.
Yeah,
It's
these are the
seeing a
ice
little bit of
blocks.
abuse. Usually, it's a nice triangle, but so that tuna ball is set up to where if there's a problem, we can actually kick it right across, and somebody has a secure line and a flotation to hold on to.
Right.
Um, the weight harness, the one that's smack in the middle of the picture there, that has, sometimes those are, they're a lot more comfortable because the weight's being pulled down on your shoulders. See the yellow handles that are on there. So there's still quick release mechanisms. So if there's a problem, you can pull out your weights and drop them, or you can pull them out and hand them up if you need to achieve more buoyancy.
Right.
Once you get back to the surface, the harness on the right, that attaches actually to your weight belt. I'm going to be perfectly honest with some of you. We have done some recoveries over the years. You get called in to recover somebody that's using a harness system, and we've seen fatalities with that particular harness system
Right.
because the quick release is actually on the shoulder straps and their weight belt buckles. The problem is the bottom portion of it, the four free ends that you see, they attach to your weight belt.
Right here.
So the where the weight belts are the buckles rather, a little further up. When you undo that, they have to slide underneath your buoyancy control device in an emergency situation. And guess what? It doesn't work most of the time. They get snagged.
Right.
So invest in the right equipment. If you're going to use a weight belt, single weight belt, use two buckles on it. If you're using a weight belt harness, you see it just has a quick release in the middle there. No need for two buckles because it's a harness system. It's not coming off you. But you
Right.
have to have a quick release mechanism for the weight system itself.
Yep.
But the slides that we're going through kind of as a class how ice develops and blah
Right.
blah blah.
Yeah.
Ed, did we go over this in part one or no?
I think we did, but it's probably not a bad idea to go over it again and the reason why we have it set up this way.
So the circle area itself would be the area that we would shovel or plow. Um, Usually with the UTV, it makes plowing very easy. Otherwise, you can actually do like wagon wheel spokes. If there's quite a bit of snow, basically you do it like almost like a pizza, a cut pizza. So you shovel out, and that way, when you're under the ice, you look up, you can still see the design of the wagon wheel, and you can basically tell from the angle of the shovel itself which way is back to the hole.
Right.
The triangle, we kind of drew some little blocks in there to show you that, hey, we're going to cut it up with a chainsaw, remove the blocks, and we bring them back where the outside of the circle is. Then we put stakes all the way around also, and then we put caution tape. Or if we're doing crime scene investigation, it says, crime scene, do not enter on it. So we make sure and stake that all out. And then the the yeah,
The, tu-
the tuna ball right
the
there.
tuna
That's the one
balls
that we
hit.
would have. That'd be 30 feet on a line.
Right.
So if there's a problem, you can kick it across
Kick
the
them
hole.
across.
It'll go all the way across it and be able to go to anybody that's in the water there. And we've got one on each side.
Right.
The table on the left is for the safety diver.
Right.
So what we do is we set up a folding table. We put what do I want to say, pads underneath the legs to keep them from sinking down
Oh,
into the
sinking
ice. We
into
just
the
use
ice.
wood pads, usually just a board cut up that we put underneath the legs. And then that tuna ball that's underneath the table there, that's for the safety diver, 200 feet of line. And
Right.
again, it's in a stuff bag. The tuna ball is laying on the surface of the ice, but the line is still in and then comes up and is connected to the ice diver. We always have our ice diver fully geared up and ready to go. And that
Right.
means mask on, everything. So it's not like, wait a minute, I got to defog my mask and put it on.
Nope.
Diver's ready to roll.
Yep.
And that's 200 feet of line. The other tuna ball, a little further down to the right, that's the one that the dive team is on. And the lines that we use go out and they braid off into three sections. And I'm pretty sure we went over that last time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we did. Yep.
But the line that's closest to the surface that braids off is also the longest line, and that's the instructor's line. And the reason being is that way that instructor can get to either one of the divers that are with him on the dive.
Right.
Then we put some pallets down there usually to set gear on, so we lay all the equipment down. Most of the time it's more than two. It depends on the class size, but usually we have quite a few pallets.
Right.
And then we have two other tables that we use to help divers that are up next to get into their gear, basically to help them dress so they can set the stuff up on top of the table and then kind
Right.
of sit down on it, and makes it a lot easier getting in and out of their gear.
Right.
We don't have to worry about trying to lift it up onto their back with their dry suits on and stuff. And then if you go toward the egress area, you see those two little round circles. We have a throw bag that you learn in rescue class. Put it on your wrist, grab onto the bag, and toss it out. And that goes all the way across the triangle also, just in case we had a ice sag or an ice collapse. And we keep one of those on each side. There's a post that we keep. We actually have what I want to say, safety cones.
Right.
The tall ones that come up like you see at construction sites, the road cones.
Right.
And then there's a plastic bar that goes between the two of them with a loop on each end, and they just fit right over the top. So it makes a nice pathway in there. And then the throw bags are right there. And the UTV, we would have it parked off to one side.
Yep.
Yep, just that way, if we needed it for emergencies to help egress somebody, it makes it a lot quicker than trying to carry somebody off the ice.
Right.
Especially if you got if you're a long ways out there.
Right.
And then all the blocks that you see underneath the line, those are all the blocks that we pull out of the hole.
Right.
Place all the way around. They help as a windbreak. And what we try to do too is if we're using the UTV, it makes it easy because we can angle the blade and just kind of do a big circle around on the inside of this and make a snow berm also
Right.
to cut down on the wind, and that helps keep the hole open a little bit easier for us, especially on day 2.
Yeah.
Again, this is all stuff you learn in an ice diving class. Once again, it's not a class itself. Go back a minute Ed, to the dive team itself. Right. Nope, just past it.
Here?
One more. Nope, right there. So what we do is, nope, go back.
Back?
Yeah, that's not the slide I'm looking for. Nope.
Oh.
Yep, right there. So what we do is we have a team of 2 ice divers. Okay. Now, if it's a class, there's also an instructor with them. So we have a 3 braided line rather than a 2 braided line. Safety team of 2 ice divers, and then also a surface tender team of ice divers for each dive team that's going to be in there. So it's going to be a minimum of 6 people that it's going to take to do an ice dive, and that would be for enjoyment if you wanted to go out and do that. So it's a minimum of 6 people. But all right, I'm good. Yeah, that's a good shot right there. So this is what happens when a rig, fails. The first stage froze up. The second stage, when they attempted to breathe off of it, what happened is because the first stage had too high of an internal pressure on it, as it comes down the hose and through the orifice on the second stage right there, what happens is condensations forms and it freezes. And what happens is now it won't close against a low pressure seat. So because it won't close now, air just continues to seep out. So you got a little bit of a free flow, but ice
Right.
continues to build up, pushing your lever down further and further and further until you got a full blown free flow.
Right.
So this is why it's important to make sure that we've got regulators that are designed for, cold conditions.
Yeah, and you can see how much ice is built up in this reg already.
Yeah. And again, you learn all about the caution and stuff like that in a class.
Right.
Some of the additional safety gear that we wear, we just pulled this particular brand out, Stormer. Sales rep Bill O'Malley was our sales rep for it, and great guy. Love him to death. But the Stormer gear right here, we had the bibbed Farmer Alls and Farmer Johns rather, and the or overalls, and the jackets. Now these are also neoprene. They got seals on the wrist. They got, seal up around the hood and, down by the ankles and stuff. So when you're in it, I mean, it takes a while for it to flood,
Yeah.
but plenty of flotation. So you'll see, our surface crews pretty much all in this type of gear, and it works well. We did a job up by the Canadian border where it was extremely windy. I think it was 40 below zero, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was colder than that. I think it was like 42 or something like that
Yeah.
below
With the
zero.
wind chill. Yep.
Yeah, Eddie, here's you right here, bud.
Yep.
So this is on that job site right here.
Yeah.
And so we also wear the life vests. Now these are work vests that are life preservers on it, and that's what we also would wear for our commercial work that we would do.
Right.
This right here was a Ford pickup truck that we were up there recovering that went through the ice, a contractor's truck, so it was loaded with tools and equipment. But Eddie, can you focus on? Can you expand where your hood is right there? Yeah. Can can you expand it or no?
Let me see if I can. I don't think so on this
Okay.
picture.
Well, anyway, that's all ice, where it's
Yeah,
all
this
that
is
light color. So all that orange, I mean, that's just the wind blowing. We were out there for 2 consecutive days, no sleep. I mean, we were beat. But look at your right hand.
yeah.
Look at how much ice has built up, the one hanging down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
look at
yeah,
all
this
the ice
whole
right there.
yep.
Yeah, it's all just all built up.
And
I mean,
this
just
and this
brutal conditions.
right here.
Yeah, on the legs and stuff. I mean, you
Yep.
go to walk and, it's just breaking all apart.
Yeah.
But because it was also, um, at first it started off a little bit. I don't want to, the ice, the wind that was blowing ice up also,
Right.
and as it would make contact with the stormer gear, it was starting to stick to it and freeze and had a little bit of moisture in it.
Right.
But I think this is toward the end of day one, if I'm not mistaken. Um, as it started getting a little bit later in the day.
Right.
But
And it,
just again,
if
brutal
you see,
conditions
this is where we were had to go all the way down here
around that point,
around this
around
point
that
right
last
here.
point. Yeah.
Yep.
And the truck was under the ice
Right.
because it wasn't safe enough for us to bring it up on top. And there
Right.
was no place to egress. These woods, there's no roads there.
Right.
So there was no way to get back there, Yeah, you can see the UTV tracks there right in front of you on the ice there.
Yep.
We were
Right
using
here.
that to bring gear out. But and that was sketchy in some places. Even though
Yeah.
the ice was extremely thick in some areas, as this particular body of water narrowed, going a little further toward that point, it was like a river. We had strong currents underwater, and I mean we had currents underwater. I shouldn't say strong currents, but we had currents enough to weaken the ice on top. So it made it a
And every
rough
time,
egress.
yep. And every time a group of snowmobiles went by, you could feel the ice sag. You could actually feel it. You know, um, sagging because these
Well, the
snowmobiles.
threader holes that we cut, remember, we
Right.
get these large groups, 20, 30 snowmobiles going by, and it would actually sink the ice enough to where water would start pouring up
Pop
out of
up.
the
Right.
threader holes.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was a rough couple of days.
Yeah.
And because we had to float the vehicle first underneath the ice surface, approximately every 50 feet, we had to cut a hole big enough for one diver. And
Right.
then, again, everybody's in their ice harnesses. So they're connected to a line. And then what we do is we have another line that's connected to the front of the vehicle. And what the ice diver has to do now is take a compass heading, but we also have a light, a pole that goes down that shows a light 360, very bright.
Right.
So he takes a compass and he starts swimming. Again, he's only got to go 50 feet, but he starts swimming and then hopefully picks up on the light. So he can, we don't have to pull him back to the original hole and say,
Right.
no, you're heading off in the wrong direction. So this way we can, send him directly right to the hole. And then he hands up the line that's attached to the vehicle. We have another hole that's cut. And then what we do is we keep the diver right there. We put a carabiner clip on the back of the harness up top behind the head, and we
Yep.
hold them there tight on the surface. Why we pull that line all the way back through, and that becomes our new hole for the diver to pull back if to do the egress. Then we send them on to the next hole, holding onto the line. But first, we pull from the surface. We
The
pull the
vehicle.
truck until
Yep.
it comes up to the next, to the threader hole that the diver's still in.
Right.
And then what we do is send the diver down, and we keep doing that every 50 feet. And we had, I forgot how long it was, but
Oh,
it
it
was
was, yeah, it was.
well over a mile, mile and a half.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
was going to say it
yeah,
was
it's probably
probably
more
close to
like
two
two
miles.
plus,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but it was a long
Because this
ways.
was a long way away. Because if you remember, around this bend is where our all our vehicles were and where the recovery trailer was. So
Yeah,
we had
it
to
was
go
actually down a little further. I mean,
right,
that's just to get around the bend,
right.
and then we probably had to go another, couple hundred yards anyway,
Yeah. So
but long ways.
yeah, long ways.
Just equipment checklist, specialty equipment checklist. Here's the ice placing we were talking about.
Yep.
Now we would use longer tails. If you see ABC, as far as the tails go, we would, at least double the length of those tails, if not even more. Because once you braid it, it becomes as strong as the original rope. But we want to make sure that we've got plenty of rope that's braided back, so we don't have any slippage at all.
Right.
And, so, I mean, it's pretty much impossible to come undone. I mean, somebody would have to actually cut the line because you're not coming out of the size place.
And again, with that heavy line that we use, that would be very difficult to cut.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to just cut right through it.
Yep. Yep. But anyway, so that's about it as far as some of the safety features and safety devices that we use. And again, your dive center, your instructor may have other ideas and stuff, and not just ideas, but techniques as
Right.
far as what to do. Well,
Yep.
so that's it for part two of ice diving. And again, sorry for the delay on that. But shortly after part one went out, we were scrambling trying to find part two, couldn't. And then I know we were called out of town there for a while. And then
Yep.
we recently took a trip to Bonaire, and we'll talk about that on our next show.
Yep. Well, thanks,
All right,
Rich.
buddy. It was, as always, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, it was
And thanks
great.
everybody for listening. I'm Senior Investigator Rich Morin.
And I'm Senior Investigator Ed Myron.
And once again,
And
we thank you for listening. Really appreciate it.
yep. And we'll see you again soon.
Sounds good.